on the wing. So, clearly this fly past has certainly got everybody talking. I'd like to acknowledge our dignitaries and VIPs in attendance tonight. Of course, Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, who is the Archbishop of the Anglican Church, and also in his capacity as Chancellor of the University of the Western Cape. Justice Mbuyiseli Madlanga, who's Chancellor of Rhodes University, and we hope that he will be connecting virtually. And he certainly needs no introduction because his name is probably spoken about most than any other South African right now. And then Professor Mohale, who is our speaker tonight, and also in his capacity as Chancellor of the University of the Free State. And so this is why tonight is a historical occasion, because I'm not sure that we've ever had three university chancellors together at one single event, although one will be attending virtually. And I have to say that pulling this off has been quite a remarkable feat. The Archbishop told me yesterday he was in Panama, last night he was in Amsterdam, and this afternoon he's in Makanda. So Archbishop, thank you very much for being present at your 12th lecture. On Saturday, I got an email from Justice Madlanga's PA outlining what his events are for this week, and truly it's quite unbelievable. He commissioned hearing, he's giving an address, sitting on a panel at UCT. I think he's getting an award there, and he specially rearranged his evening tonight to accommodate us. So thank you very much to our Chancellor. And then Professor Mohale has thrown the cat amongst the pigeons, because we touched on and PE informed us that he had to be at Kruger Park tomorrow afternoon. So we've had to rearrange the logistics. He'll be departing at 3:30 tomorrow morning. But I read that he only takes cold showers since 1984, and that was in solidarity with prisoners at Robben Island. I also want to acknowledge tonight Professor Sizwe Mabizela, our Vice Chancellor, Professor Mabukang Monapula Mapasela, the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Academic and Student Affairs, who's also a prominent alum of the University of the Free State, and you were given a very notable award, and your Chancellor is sitting there too. Dr. Nomakwezi Mzilikazi, Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research, Innovation and Strategic Partnerships, Professor Sidi Mokwela, who's our Dean of the Faculty of Commerce, Emeritus, Professor Dave Suri, who is the former Dean of the Faculty of Commerce. I'd also like to acknowledge various school heads in their respective capacities, Mr. Warren Schmidt, who heads up the Makanda Circle of Unity LED cluster, and also Mr. Leon Grebe from Kingswood, who's also the MCU education cluster, and the various other principals, deputy principals, and to say hello to the VG. We look forward to having you as students at Rhodes University one day. See Graham College here too, and any other learners that are here, please, you're most welcome. Also to acknowledge Mrs. Lungi Makgoba, the partner of Archbishop Makgoba, and she has a long-standing relationship with the city of Makanda. Dr. Millard Arnold, who is the outgoing chair of our advisory board, I'll be reintroducing him later. And then Mr. Ross Shelton, who's the 2024 class president. And so thank you very much for being with us this evening. This is customary. I always just make reference to the previous speakers, so if you'll indulge me. 2015 advocate, now Professor Thuli Madonsela. 2016 former president, Clema Motlanthe. 2017 Mrs. Graça Michelle. 2018 Dr. Makosi Khoza. 2019 Dr. Intimas Suleiman. 2020 Mr. Mcebisi Jonas. I'm intrigued to see that the middle powers that the Prime Minister of Canada has been speaking about. Mr. Mcebisi Jonas, I think, is going to be involved in that. 2021, the late Governor Tito Mboweni. 2022, Ms. Busisiwe Mavuso. 2023, Mr. Wayne Duvenage. 2024, Commissioner Edward Keys-Vetter. And last year was Commissioner Marty Kamlana. I'd like to ask the I also, of course, need to acknowledge the Bishop of Grahamstown, Bishop Right Reverend Mbuyiseli, and then the Rector of the College of the Transfiguration, Reverend Canon Dr. Percy Chinganga. So, Your Grace, can I please just ask you to come up and say a short prayer?
Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be here together, to engage, to reflect, and to explore what may be the values acceptable to you for the flourishing of all human beings. So be with all the speakers and be with us as we listen and engage, and in particular bless Professor Owen as he chairs this session. This prayer and the prayers of our hearts we offer to you in the name of the triune God. Amen.
So the order of events for this evening, I'll be shortly inviting Professor Mohale to address us. Following that, I'll be asking the outgoing Chair of our Advisory Board, Dr. Millard Arnold, to read the citation for the Responsible Leadership Essay Award. Regrettably, our students couldn't be present in person tonight, so it'll be an absentia, but nevertheless, we do. And it's because they can't be here, right? It's just a fact. So these are MBA students that they're not on campus, they're outside. So it's an absentia, but we fully acknowledge them. And then we will go into the panel. And hopefully, I did say to Archbishop, I sent him a WhatsApp, every year we have challenges with technologies. I said, please, Your Grace, in your prayers, tech. And the Archbishop responded very promptly and said the tech will be in his prayers, and he promises me that the tech will work tonight. So I'm just holding thumbs. Thank you very much. But so, as I introduce our speaker for tonight, I really want us to reflect. We look around our beautiful country. We cannot ignore the deep fractures that threaten our social fabric. Just recently, the public protector, Advocate Koleka released a highly sobering report that cuts to the very heart of the leadership crisis in many of our institutions. Public protector's report revealed that over 40,000 students improperly received NSFAS funding, draining an astronomical 5.1 billion rand from a system meant to support the most vulnerable. The tragedy of this saga goes far deeper than a stolen line item of 5.1 billion rand. The report highlights that while billions were leaking to those who did not qualify, thousands of deserving, honest students were left stranded, waiting for their allowances, delayed in their studies, and in some cases, having their certificates withheld. When we look at this crisis, we're forced to ask ourselves, and that's my question to all of you tonight, what am I to do about this? All too often it's somebody else, or it's them, or it's what am I to do about this? And that's what I really would like you to reflect on deeply. It's often said in leadership circles that rules and laws can be broken, but principles cannot. And this is certainly not a call to lawlessness or anarchy. Rather, it is a profound truth about ethical boundaries. When administrative rules collapse, when systems fail, and when the law is bent or exploited by the corrupt, it's our principles and our core values that must remain absolutely unbreakable. Rules are constructed by systems, and these can fail us, but principles are anchored in the human soul and must guide us. Principles and values go hand in hand. It is this exact dynamic, the refusal to let ethical principles bend to greed, complacency, or a failure of governance that defines our keynote speaker this evening. And I could have told you so many stories about Professor Mohale, so there's just a couple of snapshots that I want to refer you to here, and then I will hand over to him for his address. Professor Mohale was born and raised in the old township known as Etwatwa in Benoni and attended school in Katlehong, East Rand. Given all the principals and deputy principals and school leaders that are in this lecture theatre tonight, I'll quote him in this article. I still remember both my principals in primary and higher level. But the person that had impact on me was the late principal, Lepile Tanyani, at Katlehong Senior Secondary School. He came from Alexandra, ended up being a councillor there, and then life president of the Premier Soccer League. Katlehong is important to me because it was not only my home, but it's where I met my lifetime partner, Susan. He was married at the age of 19, and he pursued his education with her by his side. Initially, he wanted to become a doctor and began his studies at the University of Witwatersrand. He said most of the doctors who were my role models were from Katlehong and graduated from the University of Natal. Even that early on, I knew that I was just as good as the rest, and I wanted to compete with absolutely the best, and that's why I went to Wits. But at that time, it was classified, like all universities in South Africa, as a white university, and you needed special ministerial permission to study there. I have very vivid memories of my interview with Professor Philip Tobias, and I remember being asked why I wanted to study medicine, to which I replied, I am looking for the shortest possible course that will give me the most amount of money so that I can look after my mother, who's brought up 7 siblings because my father passed away in 1981. They admired my honesty, so I was admitted. But after 4 years, he suddenly got ignited in business management when he heard an interview with the late Maduke Lot in Louisville. Professor Mohale says, I was quite intrigued about an African who's so self-confident, factual, and knowledgeable. I later learned he was a member of the Black Management Forum. At that moment, I knew I wanted to be a manager. I still went back to Wits, but I felt like I had seen the light and decided to join the pharmaceutical industry. While in the marketing department, he studied part-time for a marketing qualification. I regard myself as a marketer by profession and really made my mark. Today, he's the chairperson of the Bidvest Group, chairperson of ArcelorMittal. He's the Chancellor of the University of the Free State, sits on many, many things. And I want to just close by saying that he's written many books, and in fact, one of our students happened to have his book with him and met him out in the car park, absolutely coincidentally, to get an autograph. How's that? One of my personal joys is getting married to my wife at age 19, the best decision I've ever made. I'm also unashamedly, unequivocally happiest when I'm with my family. One of my biggest fears is poverty, because I know what it is like to be poor, and I don't ever want to go back there. There's no nobility in being poor. With leadership, it is a privilege to improve the quality of lives of the majority of people, not an opportunity for self-enrichment. Can I make a difference? That's what I'm trying to do. Professor Mohale, the podium is yours.
Eminence, Excellencies, most distinguished guests. So when God sends Moses to Egypt to save Israel from slavery, birthed the famous saying, God does not call the qualified, he qualifies the called as a popular summary concept rather than a direct single sentence quote in Exodus 4, especially when you read from chapter 10 to 12, where Moses tells God he's not a good speaker, and God answers that he will be his mouth. We rise in gratitude of you, Ntate Thabo Makgoba. The world is full of sadness, of horror and desolation. This proud moment is yours, inalienably yours and eternal. There is pleasure in your life that imposes upon me, a mere mortal, the heaviest obligation a man can bear. Such a debt could be acknowledged, but never paid. That awes me and makes my own, exalted and ecstatic as it was, seem poor and unsubstantial. You have unmatched nobility, a bountiful magnitude of soul that makes me feel humble. To me, you are a national treasure and hero, superbly exultant and magnified in a pride of spirit transcending the mere accidents of life. We thank you for many things. Thank you for teaching us the ethics of honest hard work. That leadership is not a title, it is a behavior. Anyone can hold a position, but true leaders inspire, serve, and bring out the best in others. Archbishop, your lecture is held at the most difficult of times when we are in a spot of bother, when the world is both converging and disintegrating at the same time, concurrently, simultaneously, and in parallel. At a time that Africans in the diaspora have left undone those things that they ought to have done, and have done those things that they ought not to have done. As foreign converses pour from our lips and foreign robes hang from our necks. Dr. Leslie Mufokeng is a journalist, author, and lecturer at the Wits Center for Journalism with a doctorate from Wits University on Sol T. Plaatje, co-founder of what became the African National Congress, and one of the most significant Black South African journalists of the early 20th century in journalism, who in an article published in the Mail and Guardian of Friday, the 7th of August, headlined "The Forgotten Women of the First Pass War," in which he poses the question, what about the women of 1913? He continues to write that South Africa celebrates the women who marched on the Union buildings. But 43 years earlier, about 600 women marched on Maitland Street in Bloemfontein towards the Magistrates Court in June of 1913. The same month, the Natives Land Act came into force, barefooted, through a Free State winter to prison, and many remain without a monument, a street, or even a recorded first name. Their leaders included Me Modisa Pudi, whose first name is not recorded, and Mrs. Katilo. Their names survive in the pages of the early Black press, among them Tsela Letsala Yabatu of the 21st June 1913, the bilingual Setswana and English newspaper edited by the inimitable Sol T. Plaatje, who clearly understood the situation in Vryhoek in Bloemfontein, in Venberg in Senegal, and Jagersfontein, and called it the war of degradation. He ends by declaring that silence about them is a form of historical violence. Let us continue to tell our own story. That in May and June 1913, hundreds of Black, defined as all those who are excluded on the basis that they are not white, African, colored, and Indian, women led by, amongst others, Charlotte Maxeke, marched to protest municipal pass laws that forced women to purchase residential permits and restricted their freedom of movement, demanding the abolition of the humiliating pass requirements. Protesters publicly burned and tore up their passes in front of authorities, choosing arrest and imprisonment over mere compliance. Over 80 women were initially arrested, with hundreds more jailed as the passive resistance campaign spread to neighboring towns like Jagersfontein, like Winburg, like Fourie-Smith. It marked one of the earliest organized, recorded instances of passive resistance by women against the Union of South Africa's government policies. It is this sustained mobilization that directly led to the founding of the Bantu Women's League in 1912, was the early 1913, under Me Charlotte Maxeke, laying the bedrock for future anti-pass struggles, including the then later historic 1956 Women's March by 20,000 leaders. Lawrence Stewart, a PhD candidate at the Wits History Workshop, and Dr. Tani Bambi, a lecturer at the Wits Center for Journalism, in the weekly Daily Maverick of the 7th to the 13th of August. Pick up point in the article, Remembering Mapleton, a train wreck caught in time, when they opine that reporters in 1927 preserved the disaster, but not the memory of the dead. White staff were named and black passengers were simply counted. They continue that in the quiet, far-flung reaches of the veld approaching Heidelberg, there lies a train track that witnessed and then forgot one of the largest train accidents in South Africa's history. This was on the 27th of June, 1927. A northbound passenger train carrying migrants from what today are the provinces of the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal collided with a southbound goods and freight train near the quiet town of Mapleton, modern-day Ekurhuleni. 31 people died in the accident, including 27 black passengers and 4 white railway staff members, and injured 54 to 60 others and a police officer. The black passengers had been traveling in coaches that were simply not built as strongly, placed just behind the engine, so that in the event of an accident, no harm would come to white passengers who sat in the safer and more strongly built coaches. The black migrants who died in the accident were later buried in one large grave at the scene of the accident, whereas the white train staff received individual funerals and memorials. Today, the monument stands as it was left almost 100 years ago. It does not give the names, even though contemporary black press newspapers like Umthetheleli Wabantu and the Workers' Herald extensively covered the crash, documenting the names and experiences of black victims of those killed. Nor does it provide the correct number of the deceased, nor mention of the treatment of the injured. It stands alone in a vast expanse of veld, forgotten by most. To those unlikely searchers who have come across the memorial and grave, its occupants remain anonymous. Their story, buried and forgotten. The way in which the accident was reported plays a significant role in how we understand the story today. The history of the accident and the accompanying media provide an interesting case study in the links between history, media, and memorialization. How media continues to shape public memory, racial disparities in casualty reporting, and the treatment of marginalized victims. Amabaini is an independent scholar at the Fahamu Networks for Social Justice. And in the 2018 Journal for Contemporary History reminds us that in order to arrest historical amnesia among South Africans, it is necessary to raise a public campaign of awareness on how the majority of African countries beyond the Limpopo contributed significantly in assisting the liberation of South Africans. Xenophobic or Afrophobic outbursts since 2008 have scarred the South African nation and tarnished its international reputation. Therefore, it is essential that a revaluation is made of the myriad ways in which other African nations gave military training and humanitarian assistance to thousands of South African refugees, and on how the old Organization of African Unity, the non-aligned movement, the United Nations, and the Commonwealth platform strongly agitated for and worked hard for the end of apartheid and minority rule. The economic destabilization and terrorism that was inflicted on these frontline states by the apartheid government also needs to be remembered by a new generation of South Africans. So I'm absolutely emboldened and energized that we have amongst us not future leaders, but the leaders of the here and now, because they've invested in tomorrow much more than I have. While South Africa and South Africans made the supreme sacrifice for political freedom. There were other sister African nations who sacrificed critical resources and human lives to see the end of apartheid on the African continent. African leaders that are well known and held in a special place in our hearts, like King Moshoeshoe, Wabu Bedi, Ntatebere Seyiso, Kwame Nkrumah, Kenneth Kaunda, and Mwalimu Julius Nyerere loom large as leaders who played an important role in promoting the cause of freedom for South Africans. That the personal commitment to the principle of the liberation of women, of social justice, of racial inequality, of national self-determination for oppressed people, and the objectives of Pan-Africanism. You see, history is an important tool for equipping us to deal with the problems of today, but also of tomorrow. It is vital that the South African government, the church, the mosque, organized labor, the media, students, women's groups, NGOs, and other societal institutions are in the forefront of understanding, of remembering and disseminating the role other African countries played in the liberation of South Africa, in order to not only dislodge historical amnesia, but to sensitize new generations. Undoubtedly,
That might be me.
the academic discipline of history has, in the last 32 years of South Africa's post-apartheid era, made significant and commendable efforts to unearth the contribution of these frontline states to South Africa's freedom. For the process of forgetting historical deeds is also enacted in Afrophobia, in xenophobia, in just anti-Black outbursts. Whilst there appears to be a dialectical relationship between remembering and forgetting, conscious human effort is necessary in paying tribute to the commendable efforts and contributions of our ancestors. Ancestors like Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac. The Inclusive Society Institute report of June 2026 comes to the central conclusion that South Africa's challenge is best understood as insufficient investment, as well as investment-led growth, occurring in a context of sustained demographic pressure. The shared responsibility for its enduring effects. The United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, composed of 18 independent rights experts, tasked with a singular mandate of monitoring implementation of the 182 countries' 1969 International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, said in its findings, presented in a document entitled General Recommendation Number 40. It states that parties must implement comprehensive reparatory measures for people of African descent, covering all aspects of remedies. Beyond monetary compensation, the required reparations encompass everything from restitution to rehabilitation and memorialization. And it pointed to an educational obligation to investigate and disclose the full truth about transatlantic chattel slavery. It clarifies that countries are required to take active measures that are geared towards restoring the dignity, the justice, and equality that people of African descent deserve. Confronting historical injustice cannot be separated from the fight against present-day racial discrimination. Dr. Wilson, the Liberian human rights lawyer, accentuates this paradigm shift in the framing of a reparatory justice from a simple historical responsibility to a present-day legal obligation. I'm a good Catholic boy. Pope Leo XIV has issued the strongest apology yet by a pope for the Catholic Church's historical involvement in slavery, acknowledging that the institution was slow to condemn the practice and at times help legitimize it. In his first papal encyclical titled Magnifica Humanitas, the Magnificent Humanity, Leo said the church had taken centuries to fully recognize slavery as incompatible with human dignity, describing the legacy as a wound in Christian memory. For this, in the name of the church, I sincerely ask for pardon, my Pope said, expressing deep sorrow for the suffering endured by enslaved people throughout history. Pope Leo acknowledged that church authorities had, in some periods, responded to political rulers by regulating and legitimizing forms of subjugation, including the enslavement of non-Christians. He also noted that ecclesiastical institutions themselves owned slaves during the Middle Ages. The Pope said the church only reached a formal, absolute, and universal condemnation of slavery during the 19th century under Pope Leo XIII, after what he described as centuries of inconsistency in teaching, but also in practice. Mental slavery is the worst form of slavery. It gives you the illusion of freedom, makes you trust, love, and defend your oppressor, while making an enemy of those who are trying to free you or open your eyes. We need to describe, define, and shape, express and tell, as well as must write our own stories of our own lived experiences and realities of personal truth, of quiet endurance and hidden struggles, as a vital tool for reconstruction, for processing and healing over trauma and self-discovery. Telling your own story is a powerful way to give you a clear sense of who you are. Turning raw events into meaning gives you inner peace, builds deep trust, assists you to move through your past, present, and future, helping you learn from others' experiences and shape your future and connect with others. It lets you shape how the world sees you and keeps your unique history alive. By leaving a record of your and ancestors' life, it liberates you to take control of your narrative. It preserves your legacy, gives you power, allows you to share who you are, helps others feel less alone, and builds better connections. Rather than let others define you, impose their experiences, identity, and inner emotional wells. I always come back to the reality that my experiences are mine to tell. And I have both the privilege and right to tell my stories. They express who we are, what we've been through, giving others our take on the events happening to us. When others devalue or discredit our experiences or attempt to make us feel ashamed or guilty for telling our stories, we must remind ourselves experiences matter. It is wonderful to be in the presence of dignified greatness from the black pool of power, pathos, of excellence.
Thank you very much, Professor Mohale. As I said, expect the unexpected. That's why I've got so many papers here, because I wasn't. But of course, I jest not to be flippant, but to acknowledge the fundamental question that I asked right at the start: what am I to do about this? And that's the overarching message. Excuse the pun, Your Grace. Well, I'm got a new calling here, comedian of note. Thank you, Professor Mohale, for that stirring, uncompromising address. I mean, it's uncompromising. And we have to come to the reality. As you said, we're disintegrating and converging at the same time. How do we make sense of this? Your call to urgent transformation, accountability, and the completion of our unfinished democratic project is a challenge that must resonate deeply within these walls tonight and beyond. In the spirit of nurturing the next generation of ethical leaders who will indeed finish the unfinished, we now transition to a very special part of our program. Every year, the Rose Business School, in partnership with the Archbishop Thabo Makgoba Development Trust, awards the Responsible Leadership Prize. This award recognizes the outstanding intellectual contribution and practical frameworks designed by our MBA students to advance the cause of ethical leadership. I must emphasize that for the first time ever, this is no longer an essay competition, because the whole mode of how we teach and learn has changed from how it was. So essentially, it's a group effort now. And regrettably, because of the nature of online teaching, hybrid learning, one of the students, in fact, lives in Malawi, live outside, and they've got other very strong educational commitments. Can't be present with us tonight. However, their achievements stand tall, and we are proud to present this prize in absentia. I'm going to ask Dr. Millard Arnold to the lectern, who is the outgoing chair of our advisory board. And Millard, I'm especially grateful for you coming tonight. Again, incredibly busy schedule. And there's a couple of interesting things to share with you. Millard and our Chancellor share something in common. They share an alma mater called the University of Notre Dame. And they both have master's degrees from that university. So how's that? So Dr. Arnold has a very prestigious career. I mean, it's quite astounding again, but again, some unusual things. Millard, I didn't know this until I found it. You appeared as Doc Brodus in the Michael Mann movie Alley, in which both Will Smith and John Voight were nominated for Academy Awards. Other film work includes the role of Dr. Tony Parrish in the movie Borderline, Ambassador Richard Mason in the film Rough, and as Rick Wesley in another film. You've published 2 books on Steve Biko, a South African political activist that was killed in police detention and whose name sits on our student building. You've been a former undersecretary of the Carter administration. And you were telling me tonight that Dr. Arnold has a personal project on the island of Senegal, which was a route where the slave trade, very passionate about art, and you're creating a living art and residence for people to go there. So it is very fitting that I'd like to honor you tonight, because since you have assumed the role of the advisory board chair, that the business school has grown in ways unimaginable. And in fact, the whole reason why Professor Mohale is here tonight is because of you, but also because of Judge Gerald Bloom, the chair of council. And both of these gentlemen are very persuasive, as we agreed. So, Millard, I really want to thank you for everything that you've done. And the amazing thing is that you can ask Dr. Arnold, do you know so-and-so? And he does, actually. So, Millard, I'm just going to ask you to come up and to please read the citation. And I would just like to acknowledge who the students are. And this, as I said, is in absentia. Kevin, you might have to just help me quickly, but it's Taryn Potts, Joshua Komwenda, it was Koja Hudson, and it was Ruby. Okay, so over to you, Dr. Arnold, to read the citation, please.
Totally unnecessary to share all that information with me, but thank you very much. It is a great honor to have the opportunity to read this citation for those wonderful students who've achieved so much and who unfortunately can't be with us tonight. The Ngoyama Leadership Compass, a framework for ethical and sustainable leadership. Entities within the South African landscape navigate a complex terrain where transformation, governance, social disparity, and ecological stewardship remain unavoidable priorities. Consequently, leadership has transcended traditional boundaries of mere oversight and performance metrics. Instead, there is a growing need for leaders to evaluate the systemic impact of their choices on the workforce, broader stakeholder networks, local communities, and the institution's long-term integrity. The Ngoyama Leadership Compass presents leadership as an ethical, relational, and systems-oriented process focusing on creating sustainable value for organizations and society. Drawing on responsible leadership theory, African values-based leadership, Ubuntu leadership principles, stakeholder theories, systems thinking, and King 5 governance principles, the model challenges narrow leadership approaches that focuses solely on authority, control, and profitability. The Lion King is used as a metaphor to enhance the model's accessibility and relevance by illustrating how leadership involves stewardship, courage, reflection, relationships, compassion, and responsibility toward interconnected systems. This reflects the final component of the compass referred to as the bottom line. The Ngoyama Leadership Compass that responsible leadership creates shares values, strengthens organizational resiliency, builds legitimacy and trust, and contributes toward a more sustainable future for organizations, communities, and society as a whole. Ultimately, the model demonstrates that responsible leadership is not only morally desirable, but strategically necessary within increasingly complex organizational environments. Organizations that cultivate ethical, stakeholder-oriented, and sustainable focused leaders are better positioned to build trust, resilience, legitimacy, and long-term organizational success.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arnold. I'd just like to acknowledge the module coordinator, Mr. Kevin Rafferty. So thank you, Kevin, for ensuring that that module lives up to its full reputation. I will accept the prize. Thank you very much, Your Grace. We will hand these over to our students. We receive this in absentia. Thank you. Right, so now we come to the time of the panel discussion, and Chancellor, can you hear me all right, my Lord? Justice Madlanga, you're still muted. Can you just unmute? Thank you. Was the moderator able to unmute Justice Madlanga, please? Sorry, this is the chair of the Rhodes University Council calling me, and I know what it's about. Sorry. Apologies, everybody. I think in the meantime, if I can just ask that Professor Mohale and the Archbishop please take their seats. We'll move the podium away. If you want to just stand up and stretch yourself a little bit, please do. What they're trying to do is that We're trying to reclaim the host because the tech can't unmute. So that's the problem. So they have to reclaim the hosting.
Good evening, Prof. K. Fellow chancellors, am I audible?
Justice Madlanga, can you hear us? You might have to change your microphone.
Yes, I can now. Yes.
Oh,
Hello. I can. Good evening, my.
thank you.
Good Professor Skate.
We have to make sure we don't get any echo feedback. Okay, you're right. Colleagues, I think we just have to hope that it seems the internet connection is unstable. You see Justice Madlanga is frozen at the moment. We will proceed and hope that they'll sort it out. Okay, we're good. Justice, are you back? Justice Madlanga, you back? All right, so what we'll just continue to do our best to get Justice Madlanga back. So essentially what I'm proposing is I'm going to ask two questions to our panel, and each will have an opportunity to respond. And then after that, we will throw it open to the floor for questions. We'd like to have that dialogue. If we succeed in getting Justice Madlanga back it probably goes without saying, but I think I need to say it. You cannot ask Justice Madlanga about the Madlanga Commission, right? He's not going to answer any question about that. So please don't even, we simply cannot allow any question like that to happen for reasons that we do understand. So the first question tonight, and I'm going to ask the Archbishop to answer this question first of all. Justice Madlanga, can you hear us?
Yes, loud and clear. Apologies for all this. Sure.
It's not you, Justice Madlanga. But we're just grateful that you're here. And of course, I had to do the formal introduction, which went out the window. And I'll have to do it by memory now. I did have my notes. So really just to acknowledge the three chancellors that are here now. History has been made. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Justice Madlanga, please don't haul me before you if I get anything wrong here, but I'm going by my memory. So if I do recall, at the time that you were appointed a judge, you were the youngest person that was appointed as a judge. You served for 10 years on the Constitutional Court. If I look at all the records in terms of how many, when you make your ruling, how many concurrences there were, it clearly talks to exceptional, one of the most senior judges. You retired recently at the highest level. And on, I think, the 10th of October, you became the Chancellor of Rhodes University. And of course, having yourself an old Rhodian, having done your LLB here, we're exceptionally proud that you are the Chancellor of our university. And thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Skay. I hope my fellow chancellors heard me when I greeted them as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then Archbishop Thabo Makgoba, who again needs no introduction, but nevertheless I will. Archbishop Makgoba has a long association with the city of Makanda, the former bishop of the Diocese of Grahamstown. He has an honorary doctorate from Rhodes University, and he studied all the way up to a PhD also in business management at UCT. And you are the Chancellor of the University of the Western Cape. And you are, I think, going to step down from that role at the end of the year. And you're also going to be stepping down. You become the Archbishop Emeritus at the end of this year too. Is that correct? Next year. Thank you for clarifying that. So, of course, it's a great honor to have the three of you this evening. And Justice Madlanga, thank you very much, because we are fully aware of how you rescheduled your evening and the commitments that you have tomorrow. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. So just to recap quickly, the first question will go to the Archbishop. I won't repeat the question, I will just say it once. Archbishop, then we'll go to Justice Madlanga, and then lastly to Professor Mohale. But the point about this evening is that we've got three chancellors, but there's also, in terms of their role and position in society, we have a man of faith, Archbishop, a church leader, who exercises enormous authority and soft power within that context. We have an eminent jurist in Justice Madlanga. So from the perspective of what does it mean for justice, law and order? And then we have a prominent business leader in the form of Professor Mohale. So my first question I'm asking to you is, within that context of your role in society, nation building and hope, from your respective positions and roles as a church leader, an eminent member of the judiciary, and a business leader, what should be done for nation building? And what hope do we have for the future of our beautiful country, South Africa, and our beautiful continent, Africa? And Archbishop, I'm going to ask you first, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Sky. Let me also sit under your protocol and acknowledge all the distinguished guests and the Bishop of Grahamstown in particular, and my fellow panelists. As an Archbishop, and let me also declare that Mohale Bonang and I were at that famous university residence in Johannesburg, Wits, called Clint Thomas House, where when Wits didn't know what to do with us, threw us at the back of Baragwanath Hospital next to a morgue, but we're still alive today. So it's good to see you, Mohale. The role of universities from a faith perspective have to follow what I call the theology of generosity. They have to be engaged, yes, in research, yes, in publications, but they have to engage using African epistemology of Indaba. They have to create spaces like this, where we reflect as a nation, where we celebrate difference, because very often now, if you differ with somebody, you get written off, because society no longer appreciates complexity. Everybody wants simple answers where everybody agrees. So this space, deans and Professor Owen and Mbuyiseli are very important for universities. And one of the practical things that we can also do in these spaces is just to raise the issues, not far away, but the issues right under our noses, and make hope tangible. The very fact that a number of you as researchers and professors chose to teach here and publish from here and not go up north and leave Makanda is a process of nation building. It is laying that brick that there is excellence even on our shores. Professor or Dr. Mjwaha, speaking at Fort Hare last week or 2 weeks ago, talked about the phases that the universities in our country went through. And if one look at those phases, the output was geared either at the needs of the mining community or geared at what a business did. So we're in a phase where we have to ask ourselves, what are we teaching for? How can our inputs create hope where there is hopeless? And I always say hope is not that nebulous pie in the sky where you wish that something will happen, or you take a Panado and the problem may go away. But hope from a theological perspective and from a theology of generosity means getting our hands dirty, rolling up our sleeves and saying, if the Minister of Basic Education says she wants 1.9 billion to still deal with lack of school infrastructure, lack of proper toilets and sanitation for schools, and the majority of which are in places like not far from here, are we teaching our students to appreciate what is happening in Makanda, in those schools? Or the values that we teach is you're on your own, and the value must be get the greatest grading, get the best mark, make the most money, and what is happening around you is not important. The values that Bonang spoke about. And I also call those courageous conversation, having it in Indaba about what matters. Let me bring it back home before I hand over to you. It is nation building for Rhodes University to engage on issues of what are the demographics of students, what are the demographics of lecturers, what are some of the names that we still need to engage about and change to reflect the aspiration and the hopes of the majority South Africans. I'll stop there.
Justice Madlanga, over to you. I'll refresh, so it's really around nation building. What can we do from your perspective as an eminent jurist?
Yes.
And then what hope do we have for our beautiful country and our continent?
Yes. Let me start by referring to an old saying that goes, nothing about us without us. This dates back to around the 16th century and was popularized in the context of struggles of people living with disabilities. He argued that solutions of their accommodation should never ever be engaged in without involving them. This also became a call to action by workers' movements. Is that this should actually be an analogy for purposes of nation building solutions. That is, those solutions should involve us, the general populace, intimately. I want to use that analogy particularly because of our current state, the current state of our economy, which is in a state of decline. I refer to the economy because it becomes relevant, that is the economy of the state, because it becomes relevant to every and anything that the state can do and what it cannot do. And if the state of the economy is a palace, then the government cannot do what it should do to improve the welfare of us who constitute the nation. And as I've just said, right now, we are in a terrible state that cannot be denied. And I say so because that's out there for all to see. Year in, year out, budgets get cut, and it's getting worse each year. As it gets worse, that means little by little gets done for the ordinary people out there. Now, about solutions involving us, I would say we should not resign ourselves to being mere critics about the state of affairs. We should be active citizens. And by this I mean we should not wait to be consulted. It is us who feel where the shoe pinches. Therefore, it is us who must actively engage government at all three spheres. And we raise issues with government as we see them. Right now, what negates the constitutional guarantee of fundamental rights is sustained corruption having our nation. that needs to be addressed. And this takes me to the next part of the question, which is, what hope do we have for the future? On this, I will be very brief. It cannot be business as usual. If the nation continues on a business as usual trajectory, we will not be able to drag ourselves out of the difficult state we are currently in. Mention about change, and it must appoint the right people to achieve all around and by at all spheres government. If nothing changes, I will bluntly say I have no hope for our country, and that's very unfortunate to say, because I do want to have hope. But one can only hope if one is sure that there is going to be intentional conduct and intentional measures that seek to address all the ills that are affecting us as a nation. All right. Thank you, Prof. Skeng.
So, Professor Mohale, from the business perspective.
So nation building leads to social cohesion. Happens when there's this notion of greater purpose and greater good. If we don't have things in common, people feel excluded, alienated, and marginalized. In academia, we used to call it the tragedy of the commons. That when we have a common well, common grazing grounds, it's our collective responsibility and in our best interest to look after those assets. Otherwise, we all perish together. Our forebears demonstrated that this is how the system is organized. In fact, that is the definition of economics, because economics is how do we live well, together. Hope, on the other side, says on a sustainable basis and composite basis, tomorrow is better than today. If there is no hope that I'll wake up tomorrow and the sun will shine brighter, warmer, that's why people slit their own wrists. I think our job as institutions of higher learning, it's not just to give nebulous hope, is to prepare our students for a world that exists today. There's no doubt that all of us are teaching our children for a world that no longer exists, of big factories, of smokestacks, of generating plants, when the 7 richest human beings in the world, all of them are in technology and in artificial intelligence. So let me close by saying, I think these two come together quite nicely when we understand what it is like to compete, but also to collaborate, but also to compete. And we are very clear in our minds that as human beings, we are just part of the animal kingdom. In the animal kingdom, scientists will look very funnily at a monkey that hoards all the bananas to itself when the whole Congress of monkeys is starving, because its very survival depends on the troop. So in strategy, we say strategy is simply how to compete, but we compete at different levels. Yes, individual, company, but also at a country level. It doesn't matter what we do. That's why it's called the political economy, because it has a disproportionate influence on what we do when that environment is not conducive for us to work harder, because we can see the results of our efforts. Because this thing called democracy is not so much about electing good leaders as it is about building a system that would allow us to peacefully get rid of the not so good ones. Because the essence of democracy is not remembering the dead, it's looking well after the living.
So all of the panelists did go into the second question, but I think I'm going to ask it nevertheless. And also to acknowledge, often people don't fully understand what is the difference between a chancellor and a vice chancellor. So I think we just need to clarify that. So the exciting thing about chancellors is that they cap graduates. So you either kneel before them when you walk across the stage and they cap you if you have a degree, and if you get a diploma, then you stand and you shake their hand. And that's a moment of a tremendous celebration. It's the pinnacle of education. So one day we all look forward to kneeling before the chancellors or shaking their hand. But they essentially have a figurehead role. And so it's not that the vice chancellor reports to the chancellor, but they have a very special role in fulfilling this figurehead role. But nevertheless, when chancellors speak, universities must listen. That's why we elect them to be our chancellor. So I'm now asking you to wear your chancellor hats. And so just to remind you, we have the chancellor of the University of the Free State, we have the chancellor of the University of the Western Cape, and on the screen we have the chancellor of Rhodes University. We know that higher education is in a state of crisis in our country. And in fact, reading today an article in the Business Day, again, one gets quite demoralized about it. And a lot of those challenges we know is caused by student funding, access, the fact that universities are required to do more with less, and a misalignment between sometimes what perceived to be knowledge and skills, and you've spoken about that. So this is a very vexing issue for all of us. And I'm asking you a really, really tough question, but we're going to ask it nevertheless. What should universities be doing in the contemporary South Africa to do what needs to be done to get us to where it is that we need to be? And I think you've already touched on some of those, but I'm now going to ask you to just go a little bit deeper. Thank you. I'm going to go with the Archbishop first.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that next year I won't be asked to answer that question after my 14th year as Chancellor of the University of the Western Cape. And wearing that hat, I sometimes worry about the Higher Education Act and its relevance today. You know, if you see that there's a niche somewhere, whether in IT or what Ndade Bonang spoke about, and you've got capable staff that, for example, can teach entrepreneurship. But 5 years ago, you've applied for this particular qualification, and CHE gave you the right to teach that particular qualification. Now you have to get staff members to put this motivation and give it to CHE, and CHE approves it. If Rose saw that in Mbasha somewhere, after you have done an assessment of the soil and what is being produced, and you've done an assessment of the soil, not far from here, what's being produced, and there are pineapples there, and there's maize in Mbasha, and if the universities around the Eastern Cape were to work with the farmers, those that are in subsistence farming, and you pull together, and there's a cost and there's a placement there, and then that produce goes into the market to address the issue of unemployment. The Higher Education Act doesn't allow for such flexibility. It's still based on the old system that they knew that if Thabo is going to be a teacher, the job market is ready for Thabo. So I think we need to engage at that level. And then lastly, as Justice Madlanga said, I think gone should be the days when we rely on the state. Maybe the universities should, those with sufficient language, should start saying the notion of a state is there by name. And we all need to, as I said, fold our sleeves, get our hands dirty, and make the issues of water, for example, work in Makanda than to wait for the state to fix it. The state is bankrupt. Thank you.
Justice Madlanga, you're the newest Chancellor, so over to you.
Thank you, Professor. I will make 2 points, and the first one ties in with what the Archbishop has just said. And it's actually going to be a repeat of what I said at my alma mater high school, Mariazell High School in Matatia. I said, yes, academics in the sense of the majority of courses offered by most universities are fine. But I honestly do believe that there is a need for universities to also focus and do so very seriously on technical skills. I can already imagine that a response to that will be that, but we do have TVET colleges. I'm not altogether sure that the education, and I'm not belittling what is happening there. No, I appreciate it. It is an avenue for students, the vast numbers of whom cannot access universities. That is an outlet for them to get an education. But my point is this: why can't technical skills be something on which universities as well should focus on quite seriously? The advantage, as I see it, of technical skills is that a significant number of those who qualify under those streams will readily employ themselves. Some may still seek employment and get employed, but a great many may be self-employed. I say this as important because we all know the scary numbers of unemployment in South Africa. and the most affected being the youth, unfortunately. So I would urge our universities to see if they cannot reconfigure their curricula and do the best they can to accommodate this change of direction. I'm not saying that there is no teaching of technical skills whatsoever at universities, but even though I have not done any study as such on the subject, I would dare say I doubt that they are a particular area of focus. Then I said I would make 2 points. The second is I would like to see universities also focusing on value-based education. Again, I will admit that I'm by no means suggesting that this is absent, but I would like to see it as being an area again of particular focus, universities being very intentional about it. There's the misfortune that some students, I just hope that it's not a significant number of them, but probably it is, enter university with two aims, that is to pass and make loads of money. At some level, the measure of success by universities may well be corresponding with those two aims. Look out there, look at who we've produced, look at how successful financially they are. They are heads of the corporate world and so on. I want to suggest that universities must aim to produce worthy members of society whose psyche is value-based. As a lawyer in this regard, I will say that the Constitution does say something about values. Of course, it does not enjoy monopoly in this regard, but it does say something on values. Those that are in the founding sections of the Constitution and that are stated in so many words are the values of human dignity, the achievement of equality, and the advancement of human rights and freedom. I do realize that non-lawyers may think that this is, or this has nothing to do with them. If it's something provided for in the Constitution, what's that got to do with me, a student of engineering, medicine, or all the other disciplines that Rhodes University offers? I would immediately challenge that and say that it has everything to do with every student. And I will say, take the example, fine, Rhodes University does not have a medical school, but I will just use that as an example to make the point that this cuts across the entire spectrum. A doctor who treats their patients with care, empathy, and dignity subscribes to the constitutional value of, for example, human dignity. So there you see a student who learns towards becoming a doctor and after qualifying behaves in this manner professionally, does subscribe to a value protected and guaranteed in the Constitution. Similar examples can be given with other disciplines as well. I was quite touched only yesterday by a story I was told by my co-commissioners they told me that young advocates at the Society of Advocates of Johannesburg, who are a few years into practice, have taken it upon themselves to raise funds to fund those students or pupil advocates who are studying towards being advocates, to fund them. When pupils are being trained, they do not get any salary whatsoever. And having gone through university under very difficult circumstances, and you add to that another layer, it becomes very difficult, if not impossible, for some of these pupils. These young, new advocates saw out of that a need to come to the assistance of those indigent advocates. So they do not theorize about human dignity. They bring dignity to the lives of these pupils. That speaks volumes. And as I say, I was truly touched by this. Universities must teach these values so that they do not happen by chance. It just so happens that by chance, these young advocates saw the need and acted in a manner that accords with the values protected in the Constitution. It just happened. The human nature, their hearts spoke to them and they acted. This should not happen by chance. Universities should take active steps to inculcate a value-based education so that it produces adults that will act in a manner similar to the manner in which these young advocates acted. Perhaps I should end there.
Now from the business voice.
There's a causal relationship between the endowment that the university has and the results that it produces. So there's a role to be played there by business in growing their own timber. That's why Harvard is number one, Stanford is number two. If you go to Europe, that's why University of British Columbia in Vancouver and Instituto da Empresa in Madrid. Here in South Africa, the richest university, it's not by accident, it's in Stellenbosch. That has the highest concentration of dollar billionaires. So the role of the universities, especially business schools, is to ensure that there's resources, a conducive environment created where these students can read and can learn. At the moment, the students are taking the 54 billion rands per annum that comes from NSFAS, 1.1 million of them out of 1.3 million, to pay for their tuition, for their accommodation, but also for their subsistence. But they look at the poverty and the self-perpetuating, vicious, abject poverty at home, and they use part of their money to look at families at home. Some of them have resorted to say, I'm sending them 300 rand a month. Maybe I could use 10 to gamble online. Maybe, just maybe, I might have more hope. So our role as universities is to see how is it possible that we can have an inclusive academic excellence, bring a social justice approach in the assessment of merit, bring a contextual academic freedom, because we're Africans. We can't pretend to be anything else. To bring about a ethical framework in the way we run these universities. Because it can't be that the Vice Chancellor of the University of Fort Hare that gave us 5 African presidents is walking around not with 1, but 6 personal bodyguards, because the thieves want their dirty fingers in this 54 billion per annum procurement opportunity. I think we need to find a way of bringing public ownership in these 26 public universities, where the public is both the beneficiary but also the co-crafters and the co-creators of the curriculum they want to see. Because innovation is solving today's problems. Lastly, I think we need a sustainable funding model so that just because you chose poor parents, you shouldn't be excluded from going to university, because Mandela says education is the surest way in which one can transcend social classes. At the moment, we have a bit of work to do.
So we're now going to open it up to the floor and take some questions, and some microphones going around. So if I can just ask, just the rules here, 1 question, please. Sometimes people stand up and say, I've got 3 questions. I've got 1 question, and you ask a question, right? So if you start to give your own opinion, I have the authority to say, ask your question, please. All right. And then we'll try to take as many questions as we can. You can direct it to the panel in its entirety, or you can choose to ask one of the chancellors to answer. So hands up, please. Always prefer students to ask first.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask, on the improvement of endowments, practically, how do you think we can sort of go about that? Because I don't think Rhodes is short on alumni that's very successful. So like actionably, how would that look if we were to improve endowments in Rhodes in order to absorb some of the NSFAS related issues that we have?
So is this a hospital pass? No joke. Justice Madlanga, would you like to go first? Alumni, how can we get them on board?
May I ask my fellow chancellors to have a go first, please?
Yes, I think the critical question here was, Rhodes University has got a strong network of alumni. How is it that we can get them on board for the endowment point of view?
Thank you very much. Every month I get an envelope from some theological college in the US that I haven't been to, because they know that the Archbishop is probably presiding over the resources of the oldest Anglican church in Africa. And they don't give up, whether I answer or not. And the last time I was in one of the countries, I said, oh, I remember. I took my per diem and donated, but I made a mistake because they wrote and acknowledged and said, we will keep you posted. And now the envelopes are coming more frequently. It's one of the ways of getting an endowment officer or in the scholarships and bursaries department, keeping the alumni involved, engaged. In the university we went to, I know the alumni generate a lot of revenue because there are alumni dinners, alumni this and that. And in the university publication that comes once a quarter, they'll tell you that this alumni has published that, This alumni has died, and this alumni has endowed their family house because there's an end in that family line. So it can be done. My plea is there are pockets of those universities that benefit from certain alumni, and in the spirit of Ubuntu, not as a slogan, maybe we need to look at how do we do it as the universities in the Eastern Cape or as the universities in the Western Cape. UWC will struggle to get 5 million donations a year, and UCT, sorry to mention names, but for our sister university or Stellenbosch, we'll think 5 million is a change. So let's work together as universities in terms of raising those resources. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more, but also it's a realization that data is the new oil. So the universities themselves must do the work. You need to know the nth degree who are the people that graduated from this university and keep in touch with them. Secondly, and this is where the role of business schools is just so profound. Business schools are called business schools because they concern themselves with the business of universities. So 30 years ago, to be the director of a business school, they wanted you to have a PhD, you have published 27 articles in these. Today, what you need is a business person who's got strong networks in the business community, who can then bring the resources that you require. Because they will have on their speed dial the CFOs of the 100 companies listed on the JSE. And it will be easy for them to have a conversation that says, could you build a wing of engineering, a faculty of science, and somebody sponsors that. With a student who's doing petrochemical engineering, and you make one phone call, and 5 million then sustains that student for 2-3 years. Former President Nelson Mandela was very good at this, because on weekends he'd be sitting and reading the newspapers, and he sees that, oh, Adrian Go this year and 300 million rand as a bonus. Will pick up the phone and call and say, there's a school in Kunu that needs, and people would oblige. Lots of schools were built. Read a newspaper and it says the company results or the Bidvest Group. This year, the revenue was 130.3 billion with 13.01 trading profit. You pick up the call and say, you know, there's a village that just doesn't have a school, because he was the voice of ethically principled leadership. People wanted to help. Today, we need more of leaders like that.
Mr. Mohale, I've got you number one on my speed dial. Justice Madlanga.
Oh, yes. I believe that demographics, not just racially, but in a wider sense, including economically as well, play a significant role on this subject. I say so because you don't just call upon people or try to persuade them to contribute towards universities. You do so with the hope that that's practical for the people. Now, if a university's demographics are such that you are not likely to draw much out of the people, however much you may advertise, however much you may reach out to them. That does not help much. When I was a student at Rhodes University, we Black students, and I happen to have been a classmate of your current chairperson of council. We were in the same class. We graduated together, although we boycotted the graduation ceremony. We were a handful. In percentage terms, I think it must have been single digits, and all Black students, and I say Black in the broader sense, we knew each other 100%. Now, and the rest were white students. That on what I've seen at the few graduation ceremonies I've attended, that has changed, and the vast majority of students are now Black, and we all know what that means. Yes, they will qualify, but we all know what the chances of serious advancement are after that. The chances of advancement, making it, and being in a position to contribute financially to the universities are unfortunately not of the type that we would want to see. That may sound defeatist. Let me say this: universities must target, yes, everybody. Even very forms of very little or modest forms of assistance to the universities, when put together, will add up to something. But particular focus must be on those that the universities are able to establish, have made it in life financially. They should not just wait and think out of the goodness of their hearts they will contribute. The universities must seek them out and be a nuisance. When you look outside, because I happen to have studied abroad, I did my master's degree in America at Roman Catholic University. Not that known outside of America, but it's a well-performing university, quite respected there. It is one of the universities that have lots and lots of money, endowments. And the point I want to make is that what I noticed is that there is an untold sense of pride, sense of attachment, and it is out of that alumni contribute towards the funding of their universities. And you find that actually spreads outside of the alumni. People who have some sort of affinity towards those who actually went to these universities will themselves align themselves with particular universities. And if they are in a position to, will also contribute. Where am I going with this? This is not America. I think that we too must try to instill. I'm not suggesting that we are not proud of our universities, but having studied there, I think that sense of pride is much, much higher than what I have seen in our country. I think we must instill that, and out of that, there will be that natural or spontaneous or automatic giving without universities having to plead and plead and plead. Thank you.
So now I must ask the audience indulgence now. Are you happy to take one more question Okay. I think okay, and we're happy to take more. I mean, it's just to confirm the time here. It's 25 to 9. Justice Madlanga, do you need to go soon? Are you happy to
But if it's one question, perhaps let me sit and.
Okay, so Justice Madlanga will just answer one more question and then he'll have to go. But right, and I think it's just the concluding point earlier about the pride goes back to my question: what must I do about it?
Sorry. Oh.
Greetings to everybody in the house. Greetings to the panelists. My name is Latita. I'm the Speaker of Student Parliament here at Rhodes University, and I'm also the Vice President-elect for the year 2027. Prof. Mohale, thank you. Prof. Mohale made mention of an unfinished democratic project. And the cornerstone of that you mentioned is transformation. And in our country today, we have transformation policies that are geared to ensure that everybody is represented and everybody ascends economically. But what we are also finding is that we have a civic society that is advocating against such transformation policies. And this civic society is actively trying to fight policies that are meant to advance those that are previously disadvantaged. And we know a large number of the players within this civic society and are beneficiaries of a previous system that was meant to disadvantage Black people. So now, Prof, I want to ask you and the rest of the panelists, how do we build a nation of true integration that brings forward those that are economically disadvantaged forward, while at the same time navigating these anti-transformation civic society players that seem to be quite instrumental? Thank you very much.
I know you addressed it firstly to Professor Mohale, but Justice Madlanga, are you willing to just give that a stab before you go? Thank you.
Yes, let me do that. You see, the issue you raised, and quite validly so, stems from a refusal to accept reality. The American Constitution was signed in 1787. To this day, there is still no substantive equality. And I use substantively advisedly. Because yes, the Constitution says equality, but equality addressing the ills of the past does not just jump out of that piece of paper, the Constitution. For us to have, the Americans for that matter, to have substantive equality, there must be active steps to bring up or to uplift those who, through slavery, your Jim Crow laws, and everything that followed, because it took forever and ever for laws like that to be removed from the American statute books. Now, if to this day, African Americans and other minorities are still clamoring for substantive equality, what more about us? We are talking only 27 April 1994. That's too short a time for people to begin to say, no, but it has been, we have had 30 years of this Constitution. Therefore, we must stop this nonsense. That is disregarding reality. Now, I think it was in July, one of the journalists reported about a bridge in an area called, I think, Hatawung in Limpopo, where people do not have a bridge to cross a river to, importantly, reach a clinic that's across the river. And of course, not just that, but to also go about their usual business of visiting areas that abut their area. People who live in the area, a few, saw a business opportunity in this, and they built a rickety and rather dangerous bridge, I'm sorry. And they charge 20 Rand one way, 20 Rand for a return trip. The radio presenter asked the reporter, aren't the residents of the area angry with these few people? And the reporter said, quite the contrary, they are actually very happy because these few people, even if they charge the money, came to their rescue. What I'm saying is that shows us the extent to which some of our areas remain backward. But I know that there will be an argument that, but that's failure of service delivery. That may not always be the case. There may be situations like that because those cannot immediately be addressed. The school I went to, the primary school, had no laboratory whatsoever. All the facilities it had actually were just the buildings, and even those were not sufficient. Some of the classes were attended at people's private homes close to the school. So the only facilities were the pitiful classrooms that the school had, and the teachers. Yes, I will admit the teachers were good. But imagine if you are told that there is this experiment. It requires ABC apparatus, which you do not have because you do not have a laboratory. So an experiment, being something that must be practical, is itself theoretical in that sort of school. You are going to say, well, when did you go to school? Yes, I was in that school in 1973 and 1974. But I will tell you now, I was with the principal of that school at the beginning of last year. That school is still like that. Still no laboratories, still no other facilities. In fact, the classrooms that were there, the classroom with the exception of maybe one mud block of classrooms that was built by the community. That school is still as it was when I went there. Same type of facilities. Now tell me a kid that has gone to school in a place like that. Yes, I happen by luck to have made it in life. In my profession, I could not have expected to go any higher. I went to the highest possible positions. We can have only one Chief Justice in the country, and we have Chief Justice Maya. But I went as high as possible. But that is an exception, and I should not be used to say, but people coming from those schools do pass and they do make it. So the reality is that the sort of adult you will get from that school will not compare with an adult that comes from well-resourced schools. So it is for that reason that I say even in 2026, there is still reason for transformative efforts by government. Anybody who says there isn't is shutting their eyes to reality that's actually staring them in their faces. Now, how does this get addressed. Unfortunately, I am to the asker, I am going to hop out on solutions for the simple reason that serious and tangible solutions depend on resources. And right now, we are in the pitiful state in which we are, mainly because of what I referred to in my address earlier as rampant, sustained, pervasive corruption. I doubt that we have enough money as a state to address all of these disadvantages, this deprivation in which many of our people find themselves. I should not be misunderstood and quoted to say that the government is not doing anything. I am not in the least suggesting that. It is doing something, but we are in the position in which we are because of the corruption within government. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. yeah. Thank you very much. We are in it together as South Africans. And if you spend a lot of energy on certain sectors of society that are pushing back, you may miss the opportunity of creating courageous conversations as a student leader to say, yes, we note that those certain sections of society that are pushing back are even using much to create instability and to promote Afrophobia and xenophobia. But what are the values that I stand for as a student leader? If the values are for the flourishing of all people, I will create circles of like-minded people that will look at maybe some of the constitutional values that we need to attain, that will look at what are some of those values that Ntate Bonang spoke about, and focus on that, whilst noting what those you've referred to are doing. They are raising money from big business, some of them, using the concept that you know very well of stokvel. Why does the money of stokvel in certain communities just goes for the burial? They don't contribute to NSFAS, they don't contribute to helping a disadvantaged child from the other side of Grahamstown to work through the Drosty Hall and to see them walk out of the Drosty Hall having qualified. So my energy hasn't been on those negative forces. I acknowledge them, but I try to get people with a different energy to put those energies in order to make transformation elsewhere. I can't remember who it was, but who said, every pebble that you drop into the ocean create concentric waves that in the end will bring about a transformation. Thank you.
Sure. So, contrition is an ongoing process. You have to continue asking for forgiveness and be eternally grateful for the mercies shown. Because the essence of truth is to let suffering speak. When you have been a beneficiary of an apartheid system for 48 years, separate development for 98 years, colonialism for 400 years, as a human being, at least you need to acknowledge that I went further because the system allowed me to do so, and not spend that money now to be against those that the system is also trying to help. A big law firm says to Mashudu Ramano, who was the president of the Black Lawyers Association, when he wanted to buy a stake in Chevron Texaco trading as Caltex. Now it's called Astra, a 20% stake. We will, of course, represent you on condition that you go to that particular law firm for them to consummate the deal. This is a bank. At that time, it was just one of the 4 major banks. The name is known. But do you think that individual is showing even a little bit of contrition? The answer is no. The company that I chair is called the Bidvest Group Limited. 6 weeks ago, the South African Human Rights Commission makes a ruling where Sakeleche has taken the Bidvest Foundation to court because their notion says in this bursary that is being offered to all the employees of the Bidvest Group Limited, 120,000 of them, the company will pay for the education of the children of the employees. But because the resources are not unlimited, we'll start with those employees that earn 6,500 a month or less. This organization takes us to the South African Human Rights Commission to say, but this is racist. Our response to them says, in fact, you should be ashamed that all those employees that earn 16,500 a month and less, all of them happen to be black, 32 years into democracy. You will always find people who are our detractors. But similarly, you'll find people that are honest, open, and transparent. There's a highway that is named after one of the male Afrikaner priests when you go to Joburg, who was an activist. And today we call it the Bears Nodier off-ramp. 16 of his colleagues wrote a piece that says, you know, we want to go and wash the feet black people because we don't know how they could have survived. Because for us, we justified, we agitated and orchestrated for apartheid using religion on the pulpits. Now we realize that we shouldn't have, and we want to do much more than just promising them some utopia somewhere after they are dead. These are commendable and must indeed be encouraged. Let me end by saying, you also have to love your people to lead them. What has really contributed to the self-perpetuating vicious cycle of abject poverty. The brutality of poverty in Alexander, it's greed of our own leaders. First 5 years of state capture, we stole 1.5 trillion South African rands. That's 2/3 of what Edward Kitzvetter collects from you and I and companies in a year. It was stolen. We talk about the 9 wasted years. We mean here we are siphoning off on average 200 billion just to the 2 Zupta families. When you take over a country that was designed, its electricity grid was 50 gigawatts for just 10% of the population. Surely in your mind, you say, I want for my own people also this, because electricity is the 4th means of production when land is the 1st. Then it means that you actually have to redouble your efforts. That ESCOM that was chaired by Dr. Ruel Khoza was electrifying at the rate of 10,000 homes a month. So when you say I'm going to build 4 million houses, RDP houses, regrettably, it means you have to double the generation capacity. But Van der Bijl created this 50 gigawatts. We have been in power, unmitigated majority, where we could have changed the constitution if we wanted to. And we have not increased the generation capacity. In plate is 43 gigawatts. The demand, especially in the evening, is 32 gigawatts. At the very best, we can produce 27 gigawatts. So it means we have had 16 years of load shedding, and we're in government trying to address only 6 gigawatts. 6 gigawatts. But we designed Midupi and Kusile and Ingula hydroelectric. These 2, each to give us 9.6 gigawatts. The budget was 150 billion. We spent more than double that. We should have finished in 2016, but we haven't because of greed. So I think we really, in this elective year, next year the ANC will be electing their leadership, so that 2029 is the national leadership. Be deliberate, be purposeful, be conscious, and elect women and men that, number 1, would help us to root out and defeat the state capture. Because it doesn't matter what we do. The amounts are just obscene when one individual can be called out by name for having participated in the murder of Babita Deokaran, and is the South African Police Service, whose job it is to arrest this individual, then gets given a 360 million tender, for which no performance is expected. And in his own words, says, I was carrying the black Woolworths bag a month, every month, to give to the deputy national, 1 million a month. Let you and I try to go to our own bags and try and withdraw 1 million a year, not every month, and see how far we'll go.
Sir, may I
We
ask
completely in
to
your
take
hands
leave?
now. Justice Madlanga, you're going to go now.
Yes, please. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you to the audience, and thank you to my fellow chancellors. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's one more question now. And I know there want to be many more, but you can see the Archbishop. What is your actual time, Your Grace? Panama time, right? You're still on Panama time. Yes. So just to be fair, so we're going to take one more question. Short question, please. We have 2 chancellors now.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Right, go for it. Go for it. You had the mic.
all protocol observed. My name is Pologo, and I just wanted to ask, year on year, there's a continuous backlog of students applying to university and getting kicked out of the system. Not getting kicked out of the system, getting declined. And the following years, it'd be more students applying, having to compete with the previous year's declined students. And that adds on to the backlog of the students, eventually leading to a demographic of students that are left out of the education system. And I just wanted to ask from the chancellors, how do we then account for or make provisions for students that are kicked out or excluded from academics? Does my question make sense? Okay.
Very much so.
As a chancellor and a cleric, I don't know, and I'm going to ask maybe the VC to bail us out there. Thank you. It really is a good question, and one could look at it in terms of what the universities can supply and what is the demand. And at the UWC at the moment, there's a demand for accommodation, and the university can offer this much and no further. And some of the students will go to digs in very, very unsafe places. And at the moment, some are saying, can the university provide a bus to go and fetch them there? And if the digs are scattered all over, it becomes very expensive and very difficult for the university. I'm not justifying that, but it's a very good question, and I really don't have the answer. Thank you.
This also creates a crisis of credibility by the universities. So when we were young, we were told, go to school, study hard, get a job, get married, hopefully at some stage, die a happy individual. But that theory doesn't hold anymore. I never thought that in my lifetime, the people at the top of the food chain, clinicians, doctors, 800 of them at the moment are unemployed. Yet they've finished their studies. They've done the 6 years. They're left with just the 2 Zuma years. And they are now suffering from mental health issues, period poverty. How do we make sure that they reclaim their self-respect and their self-worth? Now there's a bunch of students in KwaZulu-Natal who, when you ask them, what are you going to do after matric? One of the options is, I'm going to stay at home. Because this student has 4 other brothers who have gone to university, have come back, they're all staying at home. Now it has become a viable option. I think this is where we are not really being creative as a country, as an economy, as a people with great natural endowments. I was talking about just the 26 public universities. There's 50 TVET colleges. How do we build an economy? An economy is built by creating goods and services that the world needs. If you get it right, you name your price. Germany is a good example. They don't even allow you to go to what we used to call matric. You call it grade 12. They catch you at standard 8, and they say, let's teach you how to be a motor mechanic. And look at the cars that they produce. If you are an artisan, fitters, tanners, millwrights, electricians, lift mechanics, if you are a plumber, all you need is a third-hand buggy and a second-hand of toolbox. You'll never starve. And yet we continue to want our children to be doctors and lawyers, but not to work with their hands. Let me just end by saying, for me, I pay more per hour to my plumber than to my cardiothoracic surgeon.
Okay, I'm now going to ask Ross Shelton, who's the 2024 MBA class president, to just come and give a vote of thanks. I think I just want to say this too. You know, often we've had Archbishop Makgoba lectures and we've walked out here feeling really happy faces and smiling and all of that. I also feel that we've heard some really home hard truths tonight. We really have. And that is the reality under which we're kind of living right now. But I take hope from that because it's up to us to decide. We've heard tonight from Justice Madlanga as much as he could say. We've heard from Professor Mohale and also from the Archbishop that we have to decide once and for all what we're going to do about corruption. We have to root this out, and that comes to each and every single one of us and the role that we play. Secondly, we have to decide, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do when it comes to those kind of decisions about the future leaders, the men and women, people that are in places that do these things? The time has come for us to really reflect deeply. Then to also take hope in the fact that our universities are very mindful of the circumstances and situations under which our students are. We really are. And collectively, we can find the solutions to this, and we'll work at it. We're not going to give up on each other. And I think that goes back to the analogy of the stone and the circles that we create. And when we hear what our chancellors have offered us tonight, it's really us developing that clarity of thought and purpose and single-mindedness about what am I going to do to make a positive change in everybody's life. And we can only do it together. And on that note, Ross, I ask you to give the vote of thanks, please.
Thanks, Prof. Scott. There's been quite a lot said tonight, actually. And I was sitting up there thinking about responsible leadership when Professor Mohale was talking and when the panel was discussing. And I want to just give a quick little story, quick, and then we'll be done. And I want to take it away from, or swing the pendulum from systematic paralysis to a bit of grassroots agency. I heard a story in Mthatha when I was down there last week about a gentleman. He's on the rural side, close to the CBD area. And he just decided that one day he was going to go out and he was just going to fix the pothole in front of his house. So he went out and he got all the tools that he wanted and he got everything he needed and he fixed the pothole, and then he decided that he wasn't going to stop there. He was just going to keep going down the road. And then what happened is he inspired somebody else, and one of the smaller boys saw him doing this and he thought, well, I'll clean up the grass on the side of the pavements. And then one of the ladies saw, well, this is really great, and she started making food for everybody so that they could clean up the streets and just improve the community. Then all of a sudden there was a solar company that decided, well, they're going to put solars on the street lights to make it a lot more safe for the community and a lot more inviting. And all of a sudden I heard that Vanguard Logistics, a multinational company, was now going to drop a multinational site right on that road because of what they did. And it all started with one person who decided that he was going to be the leader of that community. And he didn't do it to become a leader, it was just in him. And he went out there, and now I'm told that he's going to be one of the managers of the Vanguard Logistics company that's now being put down there. So when we talk about responsible leadership, I think, as Prof. Owen Skay said, what am I to do? We need to be the leaders that we want to see in life going forward. And I think that's just amazing that somebody from such humble beginnings with an idea just to fix a pothole in front of him is now going to be the manager of a logistics company and help with 300 jobs in Mthatha. And it all goes back to that responsible leadership. So with that, sorry, it was just a quick little story. With that, I would just like to say thank you very much to Prof. Owen Skay and obviously the panel that was out here today. Archbishop, thank you so much for coming down, Vice Chancellor, and of course, Professor Mohale. I'd just like to thank you very much for coming, and it's been an absolutely wonderful evening. So just thank you very much.
I promise just one more minute, but it would be very remiss of me to not thank our rockstar team, and I know the VA will refuse to stand up. Viwe, where are you? Even when I try to pull rank, she's gone outside already. Oh, Viwe. Right, Sipakazi, Cindy, outside. Incredible, right? Thank you to them. If I was at a camera to take you, are you able to show the camera for the team behind there? Can you show the camera there just to show behind the door? What you can't. Please come, can the team, Mandalaka, Q, please come through. We really want to thank you. Show that we pulled it off tonight, people. Thank you very much. Please come in. Lisa, I know it's a bit tight for you, but can I just ask you please to come and hand over this gift to Professor Mohale, please? Thank you. This is a gift from Rhodes University. That's from the Archbishop. This is from Rhodes University. So thank you again to Comms and Advancement, everybody that made this happen, and we hope to see you back this time next year. And also, you mentioned Dr. Rul Khoza. He's a visiting professor at Rhodes Business School. He's also an honorary graduate of Rhodes University. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Sure.